We love guitar nerds. We are introducing a Mr. Dave Bainbridge. Dave Bainbridge is a piano player, keyboard player, bouzouki player, a composer. He's been doing stuff since the late 70s, early 80s.
Yeah,
a lot of really progressive kind of sounds. So how are you doing now? Let's talk like right now because of the whole COVID. Tell me what's going on with you right now.
Yeah, I suppose it ties in quite a lot with my personal life, because I was actually due to get married to my wife, who lives in Baltimore. Last
We're almost neighbors.
Yes, yeah, last March. I was on tour with a band in the UK called Lifesigns, who I play guitar with, and like literally a week before I was due to fly over, and then we were going to actually go to Florida and get married on the cruise to the Edge, which I was also playing on in the Caribbean. Everything shut down with like a day's notice, and we were separated for 8.5 months.
That's horrible.
So yeah, I was eventually able to got back together in October last year, and we got married in December. But so basically for 8.5 months I was sat at home. Obviously no touring like everyone else. Yeah. But fortunately I had loads to do, and it ended up being probably one of the busiest years ever. Thankfully, really. Because I used to play in a band called Iona, which was my band from 1989 till 2016. And I'd been talking for a while with a guy called Rob Ayling from our label Gonzo Multimedia about doing an Iona box set and reissuing all the albums. We'd done 13 albums.
Okay.
I produced, I think, all of them except one, maybe co-produced one and produced all of the others. Okay. So I've got this massive tape archive in my lockup at back in England. Okay. Of from recordings of rehearsals and live recordings, demo recordings, and all kinds of stuff. So talking with Rob, he'd got this new design for a box set, which was like I think 12 by 12 inches square, but really deep. And he'd just done a box set with Trevor Rabin from Yes. In fact, he's just done in the process of doing a box set with Yes. But sandwiched in between, he thought it'd be a great idea to do an Iona box set. So basically, we had the idea that with every studio album there would be a companion disc, which would be like the story of the album, told through demos and unreleased recordings. Some studio quality, some just from cassettes in the early days, and then some unreleased songs that we'd recorded that had just sat there, and different mixes, early versions of songs. And so basically, I did this for every one of Iona's studio albums.
So that's how you spent your COVID.
That took about 5 months, yeah, basically. Okay. Getting those together, and fortunately we were going to have 600 issued, because it turned out to be a 17 CD box set with 1 CD of new music that we recorded remotely last year, plus a 24-page full-size booklet and reproduction posters and all kinds of stuff. So it retailed for like $150 or something. So we thought, if we can sell 600, that would be great. And we ended up pre-selling all of those even before it was made. So I think in the end we sold about 1,200 copies.
That's wonderful.
Which I thought was absolutely incredible in the lockdown, because I was thinking that people wouldn't have the money to spend.
It seems like that the lockdown, one of the things that it did is it got people spending money on stuff they wouldn't ordinarily spend money on.
Yeah, well, I think what I found with people who like my music is that people were desperate for something positive and hope in their lives, and so they would invest actually in music, whereas they might not invest in other things. So that was a really great project to do. So that took up ages. And then I was asked to do, I think the next thing was Probably the Lifesigns album, because John Young, who's the leader of Lifesigns, a keyboard player who's played with everyone under the sun.
Yeah.
We already got 2 or 3 new songs that we've been playing live, and so again, we used the lockdown time to produce a new Lifesigns album. John had written all the music for that. That came out in July. No, maybe. No, what date is it now? No, yeah, vinyl comes out in July. The CD came out in March this year, and that's doing really well. But that took up a fair bit of time last year, and then I was asked to play on the new Downs Braide Association album.
Yeah.
Obviously, with Jeff Downs from Yes and Asia.
Yeah.
And Chris Braide, who's the main writer, actually. He writes the lyrics and kind of works up Jeff's keyboard ideas. We'd done one gig together just before lockdown last February, playing their previous album. I enjoyed that. I don't know how much of that was, because I know they've been through. You weren't the original guitar player? No, the original guitarist was Dave Colquhoun, who's plays in Rick Wakeman's band. But it turned out that he couldn't do this gig. They were doing 2 nights at this great venue in the UK called Trading Boundaries, and Dave was busy working on Rick's Red Planet album at the time, so he couldn't do the gigs. So I was recommended, and I already knew their manager through Lifesigns, and anyway, the gig went absolutely brilliantly, and we got on really well. And then soon after that, Chris started working on some old ideas that Jeff had sent him, and contacted me, and I ended up. Well, I think originally the idea was to play on 1 or 2 tracks, and I ended up playing on the whole album and introducing a lot of acoustic elements that are not previously in any of the DBA albums, just because it felt that's the way the music was kind of going. And Chris is a fantastic producer who's worked with Beyonce and Lana Del Rey and all kinds of people. But he's like a progressive rock guy at heart. Loves Genesis, and he loved the 12-string guitars on Genesis albums, and that's kind of one of my big influences as far as playing acoustic. So let's go back to your very earliest times. Like, what are your earliest musical memories? Both my parents were musicians, professional musicians at one time. My mum played the accordion, and my dad played the guitar and banjo, and they both sang a bit, and we're in a family band for years, playing big theatres back in the 40s and 50s. And my earliest memories, I think, are of my mum playing the accordion and me hating it because it was so loud. But then for some reason I think my uncle was a drummer, my mum's brother, and I think they got a bass drum off him, which was a present for my 5th birthday, and I used to bash the hell out of this thing, and then suddenly it disappeared from the house. But I think they realized that I had a kind of musicality, so they started me on piano lessons when I was 8. And how did that go? I much preferred being outside playing football, soccer at the time, so I tried to avoid the lessons as much as possible, but I actually quite enjoyed playing. Was this kind of classical training, or? This was all classical, yeah. Beethoven, Chopin, Bach, stuff like that. But what the great thing about my first teacher, I don't think he was a particularly great teacher, but actually of the keyboard, but theory-wise, he knew everything. And so like half of each week we do like musical theory in the class. And that, years later, I realized how invaluable that's been to me, being a professional musician, being able to compose and things like that. So how important is theory? Well, it just... in your opinion? Yes. It's like one of those things where you know, the more tools you have in your toolbox, the more you can draw upon to be creative. So sometimes you can have great ideas, but if you can't actually work out how to get those ideas across, then it's, you know, it's hard. Yeah. So I think when I started writing, because you know, it meant I could, well, for one thing, write down my ideas on manuscript, which is very invaluable because this is all pre-computers.
Yeah,
I couldn't just like play something into the laptop like I do now.
Yeah.
So yeah, back in the 70s, late 70s, early 80s, that was invaluable. But it wasn't really. It was kind of touch and go really up until about the age of 13, when I started really getting into music.
Okay, so that's when soccer kind of went to the.
Yes, yeah. And actually, I was on the school football team until I think I was 13 or 14 maybe, and then joined a band, and sport went out of the window.
Yeah.
But my older sister, she was over 8 years older than me, and she was a professional musician from the age of 17. So when I was like 8, I would listen to her Jimi Hendrix albums, and she had the Woodstock album, loads of blues albums. And when she was out, I'd just put all these on and soak in all this music.
That's my next question. Like when you're first getting into guitar or piano, maybe even piano, what kind of music were you listening to back then?
Yeah.
The earliest, like say, we'll start with piano.
Yeah. Well, it was quite early on when I started getting into like pop music and rock through my sister's albums and records. So the first record I ever bought of my own was All Right Now by Free. Okay. So I was about 10, I think then. Mm-hmm. And from that point on, I just got into all the rock bands of the day, like Led Zeppelin and Deep Purple. And my sister had some Jethro Tull albums, which I really loved. Mm-hmm. And then she took me to my first ever concert when I was 11 or 12, which was to see Santana play. All right. And that was just mind blowing. And yeah, that really opened my eyes to what you could do with the guitar. Mm-hmm. So I think it was around about that time that I started getting an interest in playing the guitar as well. Mm-hmm. And
so my dad, first influences as a guitar player.
Yeah, well, Paul Kossoff probably was the very first, I would say, and still is, from point of view of the way he phrases. Phrased, yeah. Mm-hmm. And actually, I've got a story because one of my friends, who will have to remain anonymous, in England, has the Les Paul that Paul Kossoff used to play All Right Now, the All Right Now solo. It's like a 1958. It's very distinctive Les Paul. He used it on the Isle of Wight festival when Free played there. Okay. In 1970, and he bought it, I think, in the early 70s. And it's all been verified. He's actually just written a book about Paul Kossoff's music. Okay. So I've actually played on that guitar several times when I've been to my friend's house.
That's got to be worth $1 million.
Yeah, it probably, yeah. So
which is crazy.
Yeah, I know. So that's quite an interesting kind of full circle kind of thing.
Who else did you listen to?
Actually, another big influence. My sister got the Woodstock album probably in about, Woodstock was 69. I think the album maybe came out in 1970 or something. Mm-hmm. So I used to listen to that loads because it was like Crosby, Stills, Nash and Young, Santana, 10 years after, Jimi Hendrix. Mm-hmm. So just listen to all those players from those bands so much. The first solos I tried to learn as a guitarist were the All Right Now solo and the solo from Going Home that 10 years after, Robin Lee. Yeah. Yeah.
After.
Yeah, so I spent ages and ages learning that and getting some kind of technique up.
So how important was the blues in your early growth?
Actually, very important because my sister was a blues singer as well. So she had loads of early blues albums, the early Fleetwood Mac albums as well. So Peter Green would have been another person I listened to a lot at the time. But it was, yeah, in fact, I actually got to meet Alvin Lee many years later when I was playing with Jack Bruce and we were on the same festival.
Yeah. How was that experience?
Oh, it was great. Yes. So we had breakfast together, Alvin, me and Jack and a few of the people from our band and him. So we had some photos taken, but I was able to tell him that how much of an influence that song was on my guitar playing. So it was kind of nice. He was really nice guy. Yeah. So then, I mean, so once I was into music, it was like basically all my life. Yeah, to spend instead of doing homework from school, I'd be doing practice on the piano or the guitar. And
so, did you put down the keyboard at any point, or is you had two balls up in the air at the same?
No, I've always played keyboard up until from the age of 8, and then when I got my first guitar, I think it was about 13. And my dad he was a guitarist and he actually used to teach guitar, so he taught me some of the basics on guitar, chord shapes and where the notes were, and never pushing it, but just anything I wanted to learn really or wanted to know, he'd help with.
How important was your ear?
My hair?
Your ear.
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Pardon? Yeah. They've been subjected to many years of rock music, so.
Right.
Yeah, it was very important. I think. Well, when I got to about 11 or 12, I realized that I could actually improvise on the keyboard.
Okay.
So when I would be having to, when I should have been learning to play the classical pieces, I actually spent more time coming up with my own things or trying to play blues and stuff on the piano. And that obviously helped as well with the guitar, being able to pick up things by ear quickly. That's always been something that's been very natural for me. But I remember, like, my mum had an old vinyl record player, gramophone player, and it had 4 speeds on it. 33 for the long playing vinyls, but for some reason it had a 16 RPM speed on it. I mean, no one ever made a record, as far as I know, that went that speed. But what it meant was that if you put it on that and put it like a normal vinyl album on, it would play at half speed. So I could learn solos by listening slowly.
And it'd be an octave lower.
It'd be an octave lower, but you could hear the notes. So I used to do that quite a lot.
Yeah. I remember Ibanez made a little Walkman thing that did that.
Oh, right.
So you put a cassette in there and then and you press the button and it would take it in half, but it was an octave lower, so everything that was solo sounded like a riff.
Yeah. I mean, in those days you just had to do what you could. Free computers.
Kids have no idea.
No.
These kids today have no idea what we went through.
No apps to do that. And especially when I got into, like, probably the age of 13 or 14, I remember I was 13 and I used to listen to Radio Luxembourg, which was a channel, a radio station. I think it was broadcast from a boat somewhere. But it was all in French as well. But they played incredible music, and they played this live track once. I was just completely blown away. I had no idea who it was, until the end of the track, and it said Mahavishnu Orchestra, and it was a live recording of a track called the Noonwood Race, which is most of it's just guitar and McLaughlin playing guitar and Billy Cobham just jamming. and I'd never heard guitar played as fast or just as so much energy in a track. And actually, I ran about half a mile to my friend's house to tell him about it. This is like fairly late at night.
Yeah.
I was so excited. But that got me into, I then tracked down some albums by Mahavishnu Orchestra. And
Was that your Gateway Fusion band?
yes, yeah. In a Mounting Flame was the first album, and then Birds of Fire. So, I mean, it took me a while to figure out what McLaughlin, some of the chords that McLaughlin was playing, because they were completely non-standard. They weren't in my Burt Whedon tune a day.
Oh, you got a Burt Whedon book?
Oh yes, yeah.
Oh man.
Yeah.
People don't know who Burt Whedon is in America.
No.
They should.
Yeah.
I mean, Burt Whedon put out a book. What was the name of the book? You can play guitar and
something like that.
Yeah. But he taught everybody.
Yeah, and actually, when I think about it, when I was maybe before I was at school, probably about age 5 or something, my mum would always have the radio on, and he was often played on the radio, and I always loved his solo guitar, instrumental guitar tracks. Yeah. So so actually he would be another influence, but I didn't really persevere that much with his book. But
what was it like? Was it a lot of reading?
I can't remember. I mean, I've probably got it somewhere still. It's just basic chord shapes, and I think some simple folk tunes, that kind of thing, play in manuscript form, and probably tablet.
When I hear the Beatles, Mark Knopfler, I hear everybody got their start with that book in the UK. Yeah,
well, there wasn't really much else around. There was any that you could just pick up, and there weren't all the amazing publications there are now. And also that I found that because I went to music college and studied jazz, and now there's incredible jazz players, but there's the amazing facility now. I mean, the YouTube and everything. It's so much easier to find the source of things and the theory, whereas it was much harder in those days. It was so much you have to figure out yourself, really.
Yep.
Which is probably good for the ear. Definitely.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That which we struggle with is what made it stronger.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. The stuff that is easy, we forget.
Yes. Yeah.
Yep. So, So now, when did you? Okay, so you did some fusion. Like, what are your first bands sounding like?
My first band, which I joined when I was 14, which with some guys from another school, we just did cover versions of the Deep Purple tunes. We did Roundabout by Yes, and some Free and Status Quo.
Okay.
So I played
another English mainstay.
Yeah. But Deep Purple were the band we loved most, so we did quite a lot of Deep Purple tunes, and I played organ. I had this old cheap reed organ that I put through a fuzz wah pedal, to make it sound vaguely decent.
Like John Lord.
Yes, well, yeah. I mean, John Lord was my big hero. I just loved the sound of the organ.
Yeah.
Deep Purple.
Yeah.
But I played a bit of guitar in that band as well. But we did one gig, and then the bass player ran off with all the money and spent it on drugs. So we split up. But so I was in another band briefly, a couple of bands, and then when I got to the age of 16, I went to a different college, this sixth form college, and found this. The music teacher there was just a revelation. He was an absolutely brilliant guy, and he immediately recognized that I had some ability. So he helped me with my composition, composition side of things, and particularly with my piano. I mean, he was really quite strict, but I made more progress in 2 years with him than I had in the previous kind of 10 years.
All right.
My previous teacher.
So this was all right. So that's where you started your composition.
Yeah, I'd been writing stuff from about the age of 11 or 12, but this is where I really got my first tuition as far as, how to, structure of music, different forms. And
Yeah. Was this
so-
all classically based?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
it was. Though myself and my friends would get together occasionally in the music room and jam a bit, and he'd join in as well.
And he could do that.
He wasn't very good at it.
Okay.
but he appreciated the fact that we could jam together.
Mm-hmm.
So that was really good, and he was very open-minded.
Yeah.
And it was him. He suggested, because one of his previous pupils had gone to this music college called Leeds Music College, which at the time was basically the only one in the UK that did anything other than kind of classical or theory courses. Back in this was 1977. So yeah, I had so I wasn't that interested in jazz, but they had this course called Jazz and Light Music, and I knew a few people who'd gone there and come out the other end and were actually really great musicians. Yeah, I went along to an audition, and I remember playing Mood for a Day by Steve Howe on the classical guitar at the audition, and a bit of something Keith Emerson-ish on piano. And the principal, and this is the guy who was there assessing me, kind of looked puzzled at each other because I didn't play any jazz.
Yeah.
I'd never played any jazz.
Yeah.
And then they said they had their heads together for a bit and said, well, that's very nice, Dave. Yeah, I mean, if you pass it was a grade 8 exam, then you yeah. But would you be interested in playing the double bass? It's such a left field question. I wasn't quite sure what to say, because I said, yeah, of course, yeah. And it turned out that there was loads of keyboard players applying for the college that year, but no double bass players.
Yeah.
So they hoped that they might.
So the fact that you went in as a double bass player.
Well, when I got there, I actually didn't. I tried it for 6 weeks and I couldn't play it. So
yeah.
So it was piano first instrument and guitar second.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I got in, and actually, the great thing about the course was it. Apart from learning loads of jazz theory, which was great, they also had like rock bands and experimental bands and all kinds of stuff, and a recording studio. So I spent ages learning about
this was in the late 70s.
Yeah, 77 to 80 is when I was in. Yeah.
Okay.
So it was all the equipment that was really basic, but the basic.
It wasn't as basic as mine.
Oh.
I was in college. They had it was a Fostex 4-track.
Oh yeah, well this was a TIAC 4-track.
Yeah. But it was like in a microphone and a Casio keyboard.
Oh
that
right.
Was the extent of their that was the extent of their music and technology.
Yeah. They actually had some great synths at this place I went to.
The fact that they entertained other styles of music.
Yes.
That was not common in England?
Not at the time. I mean, it is now. I mean, there's great courses now, but that was like a real pioneering course.
Okay.
And there was one teacher who a really big influence on me, called Pat Evans, who was actually a soprano sax player. He ran the kind of the synthesizer course, experimental music course. So I learned all about how to operate synthesizers from him. Okay. And learned about music concrete, and he liked Stockhausen and stuff like that. And he also had a band to play his own compositions called the Leeds Synthonia, which was it was a mixture of, there was like 4 synthesizer players, of which I was one, couple of guitarists, like a rock band section. Then there was a brass, like big band section, and a small string section. And he insisted, I mean, he wrote some fantastic music, and we did loads of gigs. He insisted we all got dressed up in Greek togas, these big white robes, whenever we did gigs.
All right.
For some strange reason.
Showbiz.
Yeah, eventually he was expelled from the college for having an affair with a 17-year-old girl on our course. So, but he was just fantastic.
Yeah.
So creative, and so yeah, I learned a lot about experimenting and recording music and thinking laterally, really, from him.
Which leads you up to some of your future stuff.
Yeah,
When we get into the 80s. So
yeah.
what's your first fusion experiences?
Yeah, after I left college, pretty soon after I left college, I was asked to play keyboards with a guitarist called Gary Boyle, who was a bit of a legend around college. He was in a band called Isotope in the UK in the 70s, who were like the British equivalent of the Mahavishnu Orchestra.
Okay.
I mean, they were great. And before I ever met him, I'd seen them on the Old Grey Whistle Test on TV a few times, and loved their playing. And he'd done a couple of solo albums with the young Simon Phillips on drums. So he was a great fusion writer.
You played with Simon Phillips?
No,
Okay,
sadly. He played on Gary's solo albums.
Yeah.
As a 16 or 18-year-old or something. But,
Okay.
yeah, so but Gary had different bands based in the north of England. He was up in the north.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I think I'm not sure how he heard about me now. I think can't remember, but basically I think
Word of mouth, probably.
Probably word of mouth through the music college.
Mhm.
And yeah, so I spent about 2 or 3 years in his band, playing fusion stuff, touring around UK and Germany and Denmark, and we did one album recorded.
So when you say fusion, what was it kind of a mixture of? Because fusion means different things to different.
Yeah, I suppose. Well, a bit sort of Mahavishnu-ish, but at the time there was like jazz funk was becoming a lot more popular, so there was definitely a kind of jazz funk vibe to it as well.
Yeah. Did you go through a funk phase?
I did, yeah. One time I really wanted to be black because
I still do.
Yeah, all my favorite musicians were all black guys. Had this great feel, particularly in the kind of end of the 70s. I mean, I loved progressive rock music in the 70s, but then everything ground to a halt when punk came.
Oh, okay.
In the 80s, I wasn't really interested in punk that much, although I could appreciate the energy. So the next musical wave that sort of happened of it in the UK was jazz funk. So yeah, I loved all that kind of stuff. And
how much jazz did you have?
Well, yeah, I played quite a lot of jazz as well. I mean, with Gary, every tune was, we'd play the head, and everyone would solo, like a regular kind of fusion jazz band. And that was great. We had some pretty great experiences playing on the bill with a few of the well-known acts in Germany and Denmark, and we went to dinner with Billy Cobham once, actually.
Yeah.
Because we had 2 nights booked at this club in Hamburg called the Logo, and the promoter suddenly got an offer that of Billy Cobham coming to do a drum workshop on one of the nights. So he was very apologetic and said, "Oh, we'll have to cancel one of your gigs, but by way of recompense, you get free tickets to come and see Billy Cobham, and you can come through to the restaurant with us all afterwards." So,
okay. Wow.
So that was great.
Yeah.
That was about 83 or 84, something like that.
Yeah.
I forgot what the question was now.
Well, no, we went through jazz. Did you play jazz?
Yes.
You were exposed to funk and.
Yes.
So you weren't because some people when they talk about like how does their style come about, their style is the result of not liking so many other styles of music.
Yeah.
Their style is based on limitation, but what I'm getting from you is that you're going like
your
stuff came from everywhere.
Definitely like a big musical sponge, really.
Yeah.
I think that's the best way.
You're not hating on anything.
No. In fact, the the first gig I played live playing guitar with my dad was because he used to run the Darlington, which is a town in the northeast I was born in, the Country and Western Club there. So he'd take me to see country and western bands, and I hadn't been playing the guitar very long, and he taught me how to play a song called Paper Roses by Donny and Marie Osmond.
Okay.
It's this horrible ballad. So I embarrassingly had to get up and play this with him at the Darlington Country and Western Club. But actually, so one band that he got in there was called, what was it? Cliff Ledger and the Country Boys. And they were this country band from Ireland. So they had played country, but had sort of Irish folk influence roots as well.
Yeah, the country of Ireland. Country of Ireland.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, my dad arranged for me to go and have a lesson with their guitarist, who was absolutely fantastic. You know, typical Fender Telecaster player, playing all these bends and things. So that was really good. I traveled over on the train. He was, while they were playing in the area, he was staying at at some digs in a nearby town. So I went over and he asked me to play something. I remember I played a bit of Soul Sacrifice from Santana that I learned off the Woodstock album. Yeah. So yeah, he was very encouraging and showed me a few things. So yeah, I think you can learn stuff. I mean, you've got to be really open to every style of music in order to find bits that you can draw upon to create your own style. Yeah. So we're getting into the when you started coming up with some of your own bands that you were getting into composition. You had your you played with other people for a bunch, but at some point you have say 1989. Was it Iona? Yeah. I mean, I'd always been writing my own stuff. But yeah, well, going back to as soon as I left college, I formed a band with some college friends and my sister called Plan B. Okay. And that was all stuff that mainly I'd written or co-written with some of the people in the band, and the guitarist Nick wrote some stuff. But it was all kind of like Hatfield in the North meets Yes. It was very, very progressive. Okay. With complex time.
So when did you? What was your gateway to progressive rock?
Well, I mean,
was it always there?
When I was at school, well, it was actually my friends in the first band I was in, Exodus. We used to rehearse several nights a week at my friend's house, and then when we'd finished, he'd play all the albums he'd just bought. So that was where I first heard things like Close to the Edge, and which is a revelation, and Selling England by the Pound by Genesis, which was another revelation. So it was about the age of 14. Okay. I really got into the progressive stuff. So basically, after I left college, we had this band which was very progressive rock, but there were also jazz influences because I just finished jazz college, jazz course. And we rehearsed every week for a year and a half. And in fact, we auditioned a guy who sadly died not so long ago, called Martin Alcock, on bass. But I'd heard him in a studio that I did a session at, and thought he was incredible and got him to come along and audition. But I think for some reason we didn't give him the gig because he didn't have a car and he lived a bit far away. Yeah. But then he went on to join Fairport Convention and Jethro Tull and play with Robert Plant and all these other people. And we turned him down for our band. But anyway, so
that's a war story.
Yes. Yeah, I actually worked with him 2 or 3 years before he died on a completely different project that we were both involved in. So we did meet.
Did he remember back in the day?
Yeah, he remembered it. Yeah. Because we picked him up at the station and drove him to.
He had forgiven you.
Oh yes, I think so. Well, he'd gone on to much greater things than we could have ever done. Cause we rehearsed a year and a half, and we did a this demo tape and got 0 gigs. No one was interested in booking us because punk had happened. Progressive rock was basically dead in the UK. All people were interested in was like electro pop and other stuff. So
how did you respond to that?
Well, it was a bit deflating, really. So eventually we folded it. I did form another band, jazz fusion band, and we did a lot of gigs. That was pretty good. Called Sound Effects, with some different guys, and we did loads of gigs. But most of the gigs were like attended by about 6 people. So it was after that that I got the call to join Gary Boyle.
Okay.
So that folded. So from that point, really, writing my own stuff had kind of took a back seat, or I was busy writing music for short films and things rather than trying to form another band.
Is that how did you make a living in those days?
Yeah, bit of teaching, private teaching, piano and guitar. Writing. I got to know a guy at a studio who provided music for corporate videos and product launches and TV adverts. So I did something for him because another friend of mine couldn't do this particular gig. He handed it on to me, and they liked what I did, and I ended up doing a load of stuff over the next 10, 15 years. Not high profile particularly, but enough to make a reasonable living. Combining that with doing gigs and doing teaching.
Okay.
Yeah, and gradually teaching got less. And
so here's a question for you. When you're teaching piano, did you teach like you were taught? What was your strategy when I say this?
Yeah.
Did you bring in the outside influences, or did you teach as you were taught?
No, I remember after I left college, I put an advert in a local paper that I, teacher, music college graduate, can teach classical, jazz, blues, basically rock. So I got all kinds of people answering my advert. So some would be kids whose parents just wanted them to learn classical stuff.
Yeah.
And others. I taught some adults who wanted to learn how to play jazz, and ended up several of my pupils then went on to go to Leeds Music College themselves. So it was a real mixture. I suppose every pupil you have is different, so I tried to tailor what I did to that particular person as much as I could. And then some would want to learn about improvising, just want to be able to play classical pieces.
So you didn't necessarily impose that on someone?
No. I was from the point of view. Well, I mean, when you've got someone who's like 7, obviously you have to teach in a certain way, and because they don't know what the heck they want to do. But so but the main thing is making it fun. Yeah. And I think the thing was when I first had my first piano teacher, really lessons weren't really much fun. It was kind of a bit. Although I enjoyed the theory and playing a bit, it wasn't really what I was wanting to do. Be a classical pianist, per se. So I was wanting to not impose that on other people, but to try and make music fun, which is what it should be.
Which means you can be bendable.
Yes. Yeah.
People are personalities and people are unique.
Yeah, exactly.
The best of
So I mean, some pupils wanted to do all the classical exams, so I did those with several people, and then others. It was one guy I used to teach. This black guy who was a really nice guy who came to me when he was about 16, and he wanted to learn the piano, and he knew about 3 chords. He really couldn't play, but but he was so enthusiastic, and over the course of the next 2 or 3 years, he just wanted to learn jazz, and he loved the music so much. And we just often used to listen to jazz pieces by other people and talk about them and that. But he got to the stage where he was good enough to go to Leeds Music College, and he passed the audition there. And it's lovely when you have an experience like that, where someone is just so enthusiastic.
That you saw their whole journey.
Yeah. He became a professional musician as well after he left college. So it's not just playing bass as well. From a very, very unpromising beginnings, because he had that passion. There was that to work with.
So how did Iona start? How did that hold?
Yeah. Well, I was doing a lot of work with a saxophone woodwind player called David Fitzgerald, who's a great friend. And we were touring with an English singer-songwriter called Adrian Snell, who had produced a couple of his albums. And then he was very, very popular in Europe, particularly in Switzerland and Netherlands. And he'd written this work, which was like a choral work. And so the band was just me on keyboards, and Adrian on keyboards, and Dave Fitzgerald on saxophones and various exotic woodwind, plus a different choir every night. So sets like our sound checks were quite simple because we didn't have drums and whole band. So we found that on these tours we'd spend a lot of time, just myself and Dave, improvising together. And he's a really unique musician. We found we had a real musical chemistry. So eventually we talked about doing our own project. And at the same time, we basically discovered about the history of the islands of Lindisfarne and Iona in the kind of we found it because we were both Christians kind of at the time, and we realized that we didn't the work we were doing with Adrian Snell was like a history of like the Jewish history of Christianity. And we realized that we didn't know anything about how Christianity had arrived in Britain. And we discovered that it had come to Britain largely from, in the 6th century, from the island of Iona, this Irish monk who has this incredible story of miracles and stuff. So we went to the island of Iona and found this, which is this tiny island off the west coast of Scotland. But it's a really very spiritual place. So we thought that would be a great name for the band, and a focus for the music. Because I think one of the things when you're writing, if you don't have a particular focus, you can draw upon anything and nothing, because it can be just overwhelming.
Finding the right name almost inspires.
Yes, yeah.
Stuff that is coming out. Yes,
So and the landscapes on Iona, we went there in August and stayed there for a week, and it just the sense of light there at that time of year is incredible. And we went in December when there were no tourists there, and again it was a different feel altogether, very isolated, but you felt very connected to something bigger than yourself. So that really helped us to have a focus to write the music, and so that was a big thing. And I think people really could hear something different in the music.
How would you describe it?
Kind of Celtic progressive folk rock with a bit of classical jazz influence.
Perfect. Yeah, it's a mixture of everything.
Yeah, but I think it turned out kind of something unique. I mean, I've always been a big fan of folk music as well since about the age of 15.
Yeah.
from another friend, a school friend, who suddenly discovered some Irish and Celtic folk bands and artists. So that was also part of the influence, as well as the rock and jazz and everything. And I remember when I was about 16, seeing a band called Clannad from Ireland on the TV, who had a singer called Moya Brennan, who has the most incredible voice in singing Irish Gaelic. And I was just mesmerized by her voice and the instrumentation, all acoustic instruments. But this was kind of coming out of the progressive rock time in the 80s. Actually, they introduced Clannad introduced some electric instruments into their sound, and it became a mix of electronic and folk.
Yeah.
And for me, that felt like it was almost like the new Yes. It was like something that was unique again, where Yes were unique in the 70s, I think.
Yeah.
So so they were another big influence, and we found a singer who had also worked with Adrian Snell, the songwriter we were touring with, from Ireland, called Joanne Hogg, and she actually sang on one of Adrian's albums, which is how I met her. And then we toured together. She was doing like the opening act for Adrian, and then coming and singing in his set. And she is a great pianist and plays pretty good acoustic guitar, as well as sings and writes great songs. So we felt when we met her that between the three of us, because we wanted to have, one of the things we wanted was a band that wasn't just vocal songs, but like a mixture of half instrumental music and half vocal. And Joanne was perfect in a way because she was a great keyboard player. So she could contribute instrumentally as well as vocally.
Yeah.
But it was interesting because the whole sound of Iona, it was like 8 years earlier. There were lots of things about my first band, Plan B, that you could hear the same kind of things in Iona in a way. It was a band with a female singer, a mix of songs and mixture of long instrumentals.
Yeah.
Some jazz influences, some rock influences. So although my sister was a completely different singer, it was almost as though Plan B was the template for Iona.
All right. So how you did many albums? You produced all these albums.
Yes.
When did you get into production? How did that happen?
Well, again, going back to music college, really, and Mark Evans, my inspirational teacher there, and spending many hours on my own recording on really primitive equipment, but learning the basics.
Teacher.
Yeah, learning the basics of how to combine sounds and overdub sounds and that. And then after college, I just got to know a lot of local artists and musicians in the Leeds area that I was in, and somehow I think people started asking me to produce their demos and things like that. So I didn't really got a studio. I didn't have a studio, no. So we just hire different studios, but there were some great studios around at the time.
And you learn how to use all that stuff as you did it.
Initially it was more working with an engineer and me kind of producing as far as ideas and arrangements and things, working on arrangements. And then gradually, as I watched all the many great engineers work, I worked out how I could do that myself. And so, it wasn't until many years later I had my own studio. But eventually it came to the stage where I could do it all myself if I needed to.
So the bouzouki.
Yes.
Okay, that is one of the things. I called you a multi-instrumentalist.
Yeah.
Like that in my description of you. The bouzouki is one of those things that you pull out
And that, to me, that was totally that's neat. That made it.
Yeah.
Tell
Yeah,
us about that.
It's basically, if you can play guitar, you can play bouzouki, really.
Yeah.
Yeah,
How's it come out of it?
yeah, it's a great instrument. We in 1995 we were doing an Iona album called Journey into the Morn, and I wanted to have some kind of different folk, acoustic folk sound on one of the tracks.
Mm-hmm.
And a friend who lived nearby the studio had something called a mandola, which I'd never seen or heard of before, which is very similar to a bouzouki, in that it's got a round kind of body. And I think it had like 4 courses with 2 strings each.
Mm-hmm.
But was a different tuning to bouzouki. But I borrowed that and used it on the album and loved the sound of it. And then very soon after that, got to know a guitar maker called Roger Bucknell, who's got a company called Filed Guitars, who makes acoustic instruments. And he's made instruments for everyone. I know Aldi Meola has a few of his guitars.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he made bouzouki's, and he made one for my friend Troy Donockley, the pipe player who played on Iona albums.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved the sound of it, so I went up to his guitar workshop and found an Octavius bouzouki, which is the one with the different octaves.
That's the one that you have on.
Yeah, which is I've used since 1997. So I bought it then, and it's great, very versatile instrument. Yeah, it was almost completely destroyed about a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, by British Airways. And
Wow.
yeah, after a flight back from Baltimore to the UK, I opened up the case and it's completely smashed in. But Roger somehow had to put a new back on it, and it cost £700 to fix.
Mm-hmm.
But he managed to fix it, and I got the money back eventually from British Airways.
Insurance or British Airways?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but I've used it on every recording project, I think, literally since then, I would imagine, because it just seems to fit in anywhere, and it doesn't. You don't have to think folk to use the bouzouki. I used it on the DBA album on some pop tunes.
Yeah.
And it's often we'll record a bouzouki part, like a pick part, and maybe double it on a 12-string guitar or a 6-string acoustic or mandolin, and just get some really nice tones that way.
Mm-hmm. It's a nice texture.
Yeah, exactly.
That's a nice added bonus. You do any mandolin at all?
Yes, yeah, a lot of mandolin. Yeah, I've got a filed mandolin as well from the same guy who made it, and yeah, I played a lot of mandolin on the DBA album that came out earlier this year. So
okay, we'll get into that a little later. I want to talk about first, before I talk about them, I want to talk about what was Jack Bruce like to be playing with.
Oh yeah, that was pretty amazing. Yeah, I was playing mid-80s. I joined a blues band with a guy called Norman Beaker, great blues guitarist from Manchester in England, who's played with everyone in the blues world you can imagine. Buddy Guy. No, not Buddy Guy. BB King. Really liked Norman's playing and said some nice things about him and that. But yeah, in fact, the tie-in was the same drummer from the Gary Boyle band that was in Norman Beaker band. So he suggested he got me the gig with Norman, basically. So I played with Norman for about 10 years, and basically we were the go-to blues backing band for the Paul Jones Blues show on Radio 2, BBC Radio 2. Mm-hmm. So whenever any visiting blues players from America would come over, we'd tour with them and then record with them. So that was brilliant. So yeah, I got to play with loads of legendary blues players.
You did play with Buddy Guy?
Yes, I did. Yes, yeah, in 1989. and his brother. We did several gigs with Phil Guy, his
Okay.
brother, who I think has died a few years ago, sadly.
Okay.
Yeah, I remember that we did a session in Strawberry Studios, the 10cc studio, in the late 80s with with Phil Guy, recording an album with him, and he had this Fender twin reverb, and he turned all the knobs up to 10. And I don't know if you've ever heard how loud one of those things is.
I have one, yeah.
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 Well, it was insane.
Mine at 2 is insane.
Yeah. I mean, so loud. But he was a great player, and I think with enough earplugs and headphones on, we managed to make the session work.
Okay. Yeah.
And he played as loud live as well, actually.
Mm-hmm.
But whereas, funnily, Buddy Guy is probably the quietest guitar player played with. He really plays with dynamics incredibly well. You know, he'll just go so quiet and have the audience in the palm of their hand.
Mm-hmm.
It's really fantastic. So yeah, Norman was a big friend of Jack Bruce from way back in the late 60s.
Mm-hmm.
Just, you know, purely friends for many years. And I think we started playing live with him, I think about 1987, 88, as his band, with Dick Hextall Smith from Coliseum on saxophones.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, did a lot of gigs in UK. Jack probably wasn't going through a particularly great period at that time as far as getting work and stuff. You know, it's hard to believe, really, but
Yeah.
So we played quite a lot.
He hadn't experienced the Renaissance yet.
No, we're
with
the Cream reunion a few
Yeah.
years ago. So we played quite a lot of small jazz and blues clubs, but we also did a few huge festivals. I think one of the first gigs we did with it was a festival in Scotland, and there was about 10,000 people there. So that was a bit daunting, but yeah, great. And
did you learn anything from Jack?
Yeah, well, not to take drugs.
All right. Okay.
Yeah. No, I mean, he's one incredible performer, though, and voice.
Yeah.
And, I think the main thing is intensity. The intensity of his playing. You know, he'd come off at the end, his fingers would be bleeding from how hard he played the bass and how committed he was to the music. Just total commitment.
Yeah.
And that, I think that really rubbed off, especially when you sometimes see blues bands and they're kind of okay, but there's no passion there.
Yeah.
And he had so much passion.
Yeah.
And not only, I remember, yeah, we were rehearsing at his house one time, and we'd all finished for the day, and his wife was making us some food, and we were chilling in the kitchen, and Jack spent about 2 hours after we'd finished rehearsing just improvising on the piano. Just an amazing musician. It sounded great. Very underrated in a way. I mean, you know him for Cream, you know him for playing the bass, and
he played upright. I remember after
he played upright. He played cello
after
piano.
Yeah, after Cream, he did this album, Things We Like, I think it was called. And,
oh, right.
Okay, and
I'm not sure if
that was all upright.
Yeah. He never played any upright when we played with him, but
yeah,
just such a great musician, and playing those songs like Theme from an Imaginary Western with him, and
okay,
yeah, great. So yeah, and yeah, I mean, I probably would have done more with him, but actually, I remember around about 94, I had to make a decision because Iona were getting pretty well known at that point, so I had to actually turn down playing with him anymore. Well, playing for one particular gig because we had something with Iona, and that happened a couple of times. That's one of the things when you decide to go your own path. If you've been playing with other people, you have to make some tough decisions sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's the right decision if it's where your heart is leading you. I think.
Yeah.
It might financially or whatever be detrimental.
Yeah.
I think in the long term, it's the right decision.
Yeah. Invest in yourself.
Yes.
Yeah. So Downs was the Downs Braide Association. That is what one of the things that you're.
Yes.
Let's
Yeah.
tell us about that. How did that all come about? Because if people that don't know who Jeff Downs was the drama, the Buggles
Yes.
drama, the Yes
Yeah.
album
Yeah.
drama, and then he was the brain trust in Asia,
Yes.
keyboard
Yeah.
player in Asia, all
Yes.
that. So how did that all come about?
Yeah. I just got a call. I was in what was it, September 2019. I was doing a tour with a great guitarist called Paul Vilatovich, who plays with Carl Palmer's band, and he's amazing player who plays all these classical pieces on electric using tapping. We did a tour together, and I think just early one morning after one of the gigs, I got a call from Yes's manager, Martin Darville, who I'd known because the studio that Lifesigns rehearsed in, he used to live in the property next to it, so some tie-ins there. And he'd been to see me play with Lifesigns a couple of times and liked what I did. But he rang me out of the blue on this tour, and from the UK, I was in America, and saying, what are you doing on these couple of dates in February? It was February 2020. Got a couple of gigs at the Trading Boundaries. Our guitarist can't do it, and we think you'd be great. Because I'd previously met Jeff on Cruise to the Edge the year before, and because it's weird, it turned out that we had the same. He went to Leeds Music College as well, but he left before I arrived. But we had the same piano teacher there for a while. So we got on famously when we met on Cruise to the Edge. So he'd also seen me play with Lifesigns on Cruise to the Edge. So I think between them anyway, they thought it might be, I might fit with the DBA. So so I said I could do these gigs, and I spent probably about 3 weeks before really learning the music, because I didn't want to have any sheet music on there, even though it was only for 2 gigs. I think it looks pretty naff when you're reading from music. And that's one of the things.
How much do you do that?
I can read music, but I think when you're performing in front of an audience, it's a distraction for the audience and for you. And also, I think when you learn music by heart, even though it takes longer, then you can really get into the music, and you get the muscle memory, and then you can add different nuances to it. So that's, for me, it's really important to try and ditch the music if I possibly can in a live setting. So I noticed that the previous guitarist did have all his sheet music written out, so I thought I'll try and do it without, and managed it. Probably forgot a few things, but anyway, the gigs went great, and that's when they asked me to do the album and everything. And the plan was to do more live stuff, but obviously with the pandemic, that's not been able to happen so far. And Jeff's pretty busy. He's going to, because all the stuff that he was supposed to be doing last year is kind of backed up into next year now with tours with Yes and Asia. So, but at some point we'll do some more. We'll perform.
That for those, everybody who's watching now, that's some wonderful stuff. It doesn't sound like anything he's ever done. To me, it kind of has a progressive power pop kind of.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Kind of thing.
I mean, I think the thing is the songs are really great songs, and
it's not just a progressive thing. There is that, but
but Chris, who was the producer as well, I mean, he just let me do what I wanted on the tracks and seemed to love it all, so which was great. And the way he mixed the tracks as well, and
Chris is is he the singer?
Yeah, he sings and plays bit of keyboard. But
keyboard. Okay, so now what is his pedigree? Who does he?
He was in a band called The Producers with Trevor Horn, and
Okay. Another Yes alumni.
yeah, another couple of other, which I think is how the way he met Jeff Downs.
Mhm.
But he's
Puggles.
yeah, actually, but he's just moved back to the UK, but he was based in Los Angeles for years,
Okay.
and I think he won some kind of GQ award for the most promising person in the music industry a few years ago.
All right. Was
really-
it Lana Del Rey and
Yeah, Lana Del Rey, Beyonce, Nicki Minaj, she's written songs for, and he writes songs for them and then produces the songs. Very, very clever guy. But but loves progressive rock. That's
yeah.
really likes.
Yeah.
So yeah.
So Lifesigns was the thing that got you in all of this. Please.
Yes, I would say, yeah.
Yeah. So tell what is that all? What was that all about?
Lifesigns.
Yeah.
Yeah, well that I mean, I first met John Young, who's the kind of brains behind Lifesigns, very briefly about 20 odd years ago when we were both on a festival, Iona, and he was doing a solo set in a smaller venue on the same festival. And I was impressed by him then. And I remember him coming to watch our sound check, but we didn't stay in touch until much later. There's another time, because I play keyboards with Strawbs, a British band.
Okay.
He's been going since the 60s.
Oh, wow.
And John Young played keyboards with them for a couple of years, I think. And we were doing a tour probably in 2017, and one of my keyboards stopped working just before one of the gigs, which was a nightmare. And I had to reprogram the whole set using one keyboard instead of two, which was terrible. But the singer Dave Cousins said, we're playing very near where John Young lives tomorrow. I can call him and see if he can lend me a keyboard. Lend you a keyboard. So he rang him, and John came to the venue and brought a keyboard that I could use, and which was fantastic. And then we kept in touch after that and realized that we had lots in common, just our musical background and influences. And so we stayed in touch. And then when Lifesigns were doing their second album, Cardington, Nico, the guitarist, decided to leave the band. So they asked me if I'd like to play some stuff on the album. They had two of the guitarists, maybe. Well, Nico did a few things on it that he'd already recorded before he left. And then there were two of the guitarists, Mino Guges from Focus, and Robin Bolt, who plays.
Yeah, Hocus Pocus Focus.
Yeah, yes, yes, exactly. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and
You like rub shoulders with all these icons.
yeah, actually, I met Jan Ackerman from Focus once.
Okay.
On when we were doing a Gary Boyle gig in Germany.
Okay.
We went to see him play live, and he was in a foul mood because his keyboard player hadn't turned up for the gig. He got delayed somewhere. So, but yeah, he's a fantastic guitarist. But yeah, so so there was several guitarists, but they ended up using quite a lot of stuff I'd played. And then after the album came out, John asked if I'd like to join the band and tour as well, because we got on so well musically as well as personally.
And that led to all these like cruises.
Yeah, well, the first cruise I did was with Strawbs, but which was on the Blue Cruise, Moody Blues.
Okay.
But yeah, with Cruise to the Edge, I did that with Lifesigns, and we're doing it again next year with Lifesigns. So, but yeah, it's basically networking, really, how you're meeting people through different ways. And
yes,
yeah.
You got to be, I don't know, kind of just human skills. Being
very much,
and being reliable, but not being a jackass.
Yes, exactly.
If you're nobody wants to be around somebody who's going to be
no, exactly. No.
So
Yeah, I watched a great program recently. Forget what it's called now. On Amazon Prime. It was about session players in America.
Mhm.
All the names that you probably most people won't have heard of, but have played on all the big records. And
So there's the
Like
Muscle Shoals,
yeah, like people like
and
Earl Slick.
Wrecking Crew, and
Yeah, people like Earl Slick who's played with Bowie and
yeah,
but yeah, it's interesting what they say about all that, and about it's not just how well you can play.
yeah.
It's
They'll
so
take the lesser. Sometimes they'll take the lesser
yeah,
person.
yeah. Because if you're going to be on tour with someone for a year, you really have to get on.
Yeah,
They've got to be
yeah,
someone you can get on with.
yeah,
And also, you might have all the chops in the world, but if what you're playing isn't appropriate for the style of music,
yeah,
then it's not worth anything really.
yeah.
So you've got to be very sensitive to the music that you're
Absolutely,
put
yeah,
in front of you.
yeah.
Yeah, I found that especially with the Strawbs because they've got the fan base going back 40 or more years,
Mhm.
50 years, actually 50 years because we did the 50th
So
anniversary.
now I got to do my homework.
Oh yeah, Strawbs, the first English band signed to A&M Records in
Okay.
70.
What songs do we know by them?
Lay Down was certainly a big hit in the UK.
Okay.
Their big album was Hero and Heroine.
What?
Hero and Heroine.
Okay.
Their big progressive album of the 70s.
Okay.
Yeah, they were huge. They did massive tours in the 70s.
Yeah.
And then had a hiatus for a while.
Yeah.
But they've still got a big fan base. But their music has a very particular sound. So I play keyboards with them mainly.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of mellotron kind of sounds. And
Uh-huh.
but what's kept them fresh? The singer Dave said whenever someone joins the band, and their first keyboard player was Rick Wakeman before he left Strawbs to join Yes.
Okay.
And they've had some great keyboard players, Don Airy.
Yeah, he's not bad either.
Yeah, yeah, Blue Weaver. Yeah, Blue Weaver left them to joined the Bee Gees and became a millionaire by writing half of Saturday Night Fever.
Okay.
But yeah, he produced the last album.
He's the man responsible for all those chord changes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's lots of Strawb kind of connections everywhere.
Mhm.
But their music is a very particular sound, a mixture of kind of progressive rock and folk. And yeah, I've played on a couple of studio albums and been very mindful that you have to be respectful of that tradition as well as
Yes.
trying to bring new things as well. But they've always said that whoever joins the band, they would give free rein to in a way. So it's just been nice.
Mhm. So what are you doing now? What is in the rest of 2021?
Well, I've got to finish mixing I'm working on my fourth studio album called To the Far Away, which was inspired a lot by lockdown last year and being apart from my fiance, who's now my wife. But it's not a kind of soppy album by any means. Lots of progressive, long songs and things.
Weird time signatures and.
Yes, there's one bit in. Oh, it's really weird.
You just 17/8 and.
Well, it's whenever I come up with something that's like an odd time signature, it's usually I have no idea what the time signature is until I work it out later. So it's if it feels good and it's got a good groove, then that's the important thing, regardless of what time. Yeah, I listened to a lot of Bulgarian folk music at one point.
Okay.
A lot of it's in 15, 16.
Oh yeah.
But swings like anything because it's just once your ears are accustomed to that. But anyway, yeah. So there's one bit that's some very odd things. Two bars of 16, 3/16, and a bar of 11/8. So anyway, something very complicated. I know the bass player and drummer on the album hated me for it, but it sounds great.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm finishing that. Hopefully that'll be out in September on Gonzo Multimedia. There's then it's gigs coming up finally. I do a duo with a great singer called Sally Mania, who's the daughter of keyboard player Kerry Mania, who was in a band called Gentle Giant in the 70s.
Okay.
But she's a great singer and multi-instrumentalist, and we've got a duo kind of set that we do. So I've got some gigs coming up with her, which are the first ones in 16 months. First one's next month. Then a tour with Lifesigns, one gig with Strawbs, and then into next year there's more touring with Lifesigns. But there's also another Iona box set going to be coming up, which is going to be the live albums box set as opposed to the studio albums one. Because I've got loads of tapes and videos of the band over the years. Some like from the desk recordings, some good recordings on digital audio, some just on cassette. But there's so much live recording there, and the band was really, I think, really strong as a live act. So the plan is to do a whole live album. We actually recorded 3 double live albums, so they're all going to be reissued as well, along with all the unreleased live stuff and some live DVD stuff. So that's going to be a big task because it means going through hundreds of tapes again, but that'll probably be taking place later in the year.
Yeah. July 13th, we are going to have We Love Guitar Nerds is going to be doing an online guitar summit, of which you're going to be one of the very honor. We're happy to have you. So we don't even know what you're going to do yet, but I'm excited.
No, I've got no idea. No, actually, yeah, I think probably focusing on stuff like tone and articulation. As far as guitar, and maybe talking a bit about composition.
Yes, because as I said, you're not everybody's the composer you are, because that's our mutual friend. We want to thank Tobias Hurwitz.
Yes,
that is the thing that he said about you, is like your composer chops are just, your composer arranger chops are just amazing.
Yeah.
We're envious because I don't have that, because you have all the piano that you brought into it.
Yes,
So
certainly being able to play the piano as well as the guitar has been pretty useful, because you can just see harmonies laid out much easier on the guitar, I think. So yeah, actually I'd encourage anyone who plays guitar to even learning keyboard at a basic level is going to be useful as far as composition. Yes.
Well, thank you so much. And as I said, we look forward to July 13th.
Yes.
We Love Guitar Nerds online guitar summit. And this was fun.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. We'll talk to you soon. We'll be in touch.
Excellent.
All right.
Yeah.
Alrighty.
All right.
Thanks so much.
Bye.
Bye.